application for us. Thank you. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
I
Yeah.
found a typo,
Okay.
and it's somebody's name, so I think it's important. It's my son.
Okay.
It's listed as Chad Davis, and it should be Chad Douglas,
Oops.
because he wanted to be on record as showing his concern, and that's not him. That's the only
Good
thing I-
catch. Thank you, Rita.
All right. Yeah, y'all made me stand in the hall.
Do we have a motion then to approve the minutes as amended?
I move that.
Okay, thank you. Dan. You second? Okay.
I'll
All,
second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We have a financial report.
Yeah, if you'll turn to the one that says balance sheet, we're not gonna talk to that page. But turn one over to the one that says statement of account activities, and we are gonna talk to that page. And this is for the month of March, and if you might remember, we didn't have one in, February because we were in the process of making transfers of our accounting services from, I forget who's doing it now.
Bray's bookkeeping.
Yeah, and so we didn't have one yet for February, so we're actually looking at March year-to-date. By approving March, we're gonna be approving February too, which we didn't have a chance to review. So we'll look at the statement of account activities. It's the month of March, which means if we're on budget, all these percentages would be 75%. Well, the numbers are shown on the first page and the back of it, and the percentages are actually on a separate page. I'm not gonna talk to the percentage page other than to call out a few specific percentages, which you're welcome to look at them if you want. So if we start on the very first, statement of account activities for the month of March, we go down 2 lines, you'll see Boyle County contribution. They had not yet made their contribution yet.
They have since made it. There was just a little confusion with that, so, yeah.
So that's the reason, quite frankly, when you go down to the total commission revenue, which is about in the middle of the page where it says our total commission revenue is, I guess it's 123,424, compared to a budget of 194,000. We're only at 64%. If Boyle County would have made their contribution, we'd be, I have it calculated at 73%. So we'd basically be right on budget for our income. We are a little low on total review fees. That's kind of in the middle, about a quarter of the way down the page. Total review fees, we've got $24,000, and that's about 50% of what we budgeted. So we're a little light yet on review fees, but overall, we're very close to being on budget on revenue. So then we'll go to expenses, and if you drop almost 3/4 way down the page, you'll see total personnel. And we're at $98,000 in total personnel expenses versus a budget of 166. That's only like 59%. You would expect that, again, to be closer to 75%. But again, the main reason is that the county is picking up the health and dental insurance, you might remember, this year. We budgeted for it, but we're not paying for it, so consequently, we're quite a bit under budget, under total personnel. And if you flip to the last page I'll talk to, and all those percentages on the back, if you look at total office, which is just a few lines down from the top, or total local travel expense, or go about halfway down and see total contractual services, they're all running below budget, or our expenses. So if you look at our total expenditures, we're almost down at the bottom. We're at $134,923 versus a total year budget of $236,105. So we're at like 57% of our budgeted annual expenses versus you would expect if everything was running right on budget at 75%. So overall, we're at, 64% of revenue and 57% of expenses, so there's really nothing specifically I think I have to say unless, Michaela, you have anything you want to point out?
No?
And Terry, the savings that we're getting from the not budgeting for dental, that
Right.
goes away in next year's budget, right?
I won't be budgeting for it.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will not be budgeting for it next year.
Yeah, okay.
So we need a motion to accept the financial.
So do we have a motion to accept the financial statement?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Ms. Lee?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. You want to go over construction sureties, Michaela?
Sure. I've just got one update. Petrie Ventures LLC, Selby Green, Section 3, Lot C3 and C4. They built, if you all recall, some of those condo homes that are right in the front of Shelby Green off Breathitt Ave. We held a bond for utilities that needed to be put in place to serve his lot for the condos. The utility company has told me that everything looks good and letter of credit is ready to be released. So release letter of credit in amount of $31,614. Any questions on that one? Okay.
So I'll make a motion that we release the construction security for Petrie Ventures.
Yeah. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Okay, moving on to the public hearing part of the meeting, subdivision approvals. And so, I suspend the planning and zoning meeting and we'll go into the public hearing. No, I don't think we have to have a motion to do that, do we?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so, Michaela, you want to present the public hearing?
Sure. So we have an application that, to be quite frank, I'm not sure if it's still on the table or not currently, for a site plan amendment for the construction of 2 new commercial structures. We tabled it to the March meeting. We did not have a March meeting. Emery, could you tell me if that's still on the table or not?
And until we've had some motion to dispose of it one way or the other, to table it or to deny it, then it's still,
Okay.
It's still in
Even though
play.
we only tabled it till March?
right, with absent a March meeting, no action has been taken.
Okay, okay. We had a meeting with them probably about a month ago with the fire marshal, the city engineer, and myself to work through some of the issues that were coming up, which is why this has been continually tabled. I expected them to bring it this month. I have not heard an update. They said maybe May, but to be quite frank, I'm just not quite sure when it's gonna come. We can continue to table it. We can take it off the table. I'm probably gonna re-advertise for it at this point, just because my understanding with the new site plan they're bringing in, they're only gonna propose 1 hotel instead of the 2 that they had originally applied for. But I'll leave it to your all's discretion if you just wanna table it for 1 more month or.
The other option, I think, would be to pass it until such time as the applicant asks for it to be put back on the agenda.
Okay.
How did you refer to that? Just pass it?
Pass it generally
Oh,
would be
okay,
the,
pass it, Jenny. Yeah.
Do we need a motion to do that?
yes, sir.
Okay.
So your 3 choices were to do nothing and just table it again, and the other one was to pull it off the table and have them reapply? Or how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know if that would be a denial or.
Right, I think denial, it's pass it to a date certain, pass it generally, deny it. There's probably no grounds to approve it at this point.
Well, that's what I was getting to. That's the only thing I'm sure in my mind. There's no grounds to approve it.
Right.
So it's a question if we, and since you have had a conversation recently with it, which is good, I was curious when it was on the agenda whether you've even heard anything since that time.
Yeah.
So it is being looked at and considered on there.
And it
Yeah.
still is on the table. I mean, it's
Yeah.
still before us.
You've had a meeting a month ago, too. So-
Yeah, something like that.
Why would we not just deny this?
You know, we would have to charge new fees. It'd be a full new application if we denied it. I think that's the planning commission's discretion if they want to do that.
It would make more
we
sense to
can just
just
pass
push
it.
it off indefinitely.
Yeah.
Well, it
they're
also
ready.
closes that closes that version, as you said, of 2 different hotels, which is no longer a discussion that you're.
Yeah, I mean, it's not completely uncommon for somebody to come in with a
Yeah.
plan and then, you know, once
Change
they
it.
go through tech review needing to change it. This is just taking probably a little bit longer than we were anticipating, but that's not completely out of the realm of,
Well, I guess what if we, I don't know that we need to deny it, because I'm like you, I don't particularly, as long as there's conversation, but does it has to stay on the list of public hearing items with a,
yes.
okay.
Yeah, I'd have to continue it on the agenda if it's on the table, so.
I,
I don't like the idea of making them pay twice for the same
Right.
thing.
No,
Right.
I don't really either.
I think Henry's language seems the most reasonable. You're
Yeah.
postponing it until they have some,
I guess that's where I was thinking.
until they're ready.
That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking, Dan, was postpone. And-
Yeah, I mean, I think if we get a year out or something, at that point, we might want to consider it, or it's just an application that's never heard.
Sure.
You know.
Right.
So do we have a motion to pass it, not pass it, but pass it by, as Henry said?
To pass it generally or pass it awaiting applicant renotice.
Do you want to put a date on it? You mentioned that, I think you did, you said, or with the date. I mean, I don't know. I don't like the indefinite phrase, that's the only thing I don't like. is that
Well, we
just-
can always come back at a later meeting and do another change of direction if it's not active.
We're belaboring this a little bit, but I
Yes.
think the problem with setting a date certain is then someone has to be on the hook for remembering that date certain and tracking that down, which I think ought to be more on the applicant. And so just,
That's what I was doing. I need to get a response from the applicant, a desire
Yeah,
to do
put
something
the
more.
pressure on the applicant to, so uncertain is not on our table, but it's on theirs.
So if we do this, Henry, would I remove it from the agenda until such time they bring it back?
yes.
Okay.
I would-
Do we have a motion to do that?
I'd like to make a motion that we do that, what Henry's referring to, so that it can be passed it on and expecting that the applicant will respond and let us know what the next step is.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor? Thank goodness. Okay, then we have a second public hearing, right, Michaela?
Yep, that's correct.
So we moved from regular meeting back into public hearing.
I think the public hearing is within the context of the regular meeting. It's not necessarily suspending the one to start the other.
Okay. All right.
Okay. The Danville-Boyle County Planning and Zoning Commission has filed an application to amend Article 5 of the joint zoning ordinance. So as you all are familiar, this is for the solar ordinance amendment, or merchant electric generating facility, is how we refer to it in our zoning ordinance. The way I did these edits were anything that's highlighted and in red are new additions that have been made. Anything that's red underlined is what the planning commission previously approved and sent that recommendation to the fiscal court. The fiscal court essentially denied it, instituted the moratorium, so now we're bringing this back. They're looking to close out the moratorium within, I believe it's 5 months now. So they're looking for planning commission to make a new recommendation. They'll take that recommendation up so they can close the moratorium. So again, all highlighted as new additions. I met with the advisory committee on this last week, I believe. One of the items that came up, our previous iteration, we asked that anything in unincorporated Boyle County be within industrial zoning district, so light industrial, heavy industrial, or industrial business district. One of the thoughts that came up as part of that is that we might go through a zone change to allow these solar farms to go through, but farming is not a permitted use in the industrial district in the county. So that would basically be rendering it as, you know, what its previous use or potentially future use of farming not being permitted. So I've added in that language that farming, crop, and livestock production, you can do that. If you want to see it for all of our agricultural uses, we can. I only did it for farming, crop, and livestock production in this draft. Again, this is a draft, so any comments that you all have, any changes that you want to see as part of this, just let me know. Or if you have questions as I'm going through this, feel free to ask them, but.
So I think that, Michaela, that's, in your mind, that would allow then like this ag solar stuff where you have sheep underneath panels or grow crops underneath panels, that's now okay.
Yep, or if, you know, somebody owns, you know, a larger farm and part of that property is rezoned as industrial, but they still have some farming
Ag.
things that are going on within that. It just, I included language within the use table to make it permitted, and then I also made farming and crop production an accessory use for this type of use. So
Okay.
we kind of covered all our bases, but again, I only did it for farming, crop, and livestock production. We have some additional like confined animal feeding, roadside stand, agritourism uses, limited meat or poultry processing that I did not make it for all of them in unincorporated Boyle. If you all want to see that, I can. I was covering our bases with, you know, actual farming and crop production,
Right.
livestock production, but, and then, we only brought this through the county last time. So under merchant electric generating facility, I just broke the two out because we would have essentially been changing, right now in the cities, they have it as permitted in ag zoning districts. If we removed that, it would have required all the cities' approval when all of our specific use standards we're discussing are all applicable only to the county. So that's why I just broke that out. So the cities will not have to take this up. This will just be, this is only applicable to the unincorporated Boyle County.
So the only approval will be fiscal court.
Yep.
Okay.
I did have one observation, and it was there before. The use of merchant electric generating facility includes not only the solar, but also wind.
It does, yep.
And some of the clearances we have from wind towers that we have in our item here of like 750, which is on one of the, 500 feet, which is on the page 5-46, probably needs to be much bigger for a tower, distance-wise.
Yeah, just so it has clearance from the road in case there's failure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So so I was wondering here whether this should be the category that we're in, item D, merchants general electric generating facility, whether it should be specific to solar. Or because it's in another section defining those
For
elements
wind.
for wind.
Seems to me there's a whole different set of requirements or concerns about height as well as distance and offset
Yes,
for
there's
wind.
many things on the wind.
Yeah, it might be better to separate the two.
I didn't know whether
Yeah.
that was, the way we got it is kind of tight, blended in.
Yeah, it is tied together. Yeah, that's a good point.
Could you add the word solar in front of merchant? And the reason I'm asking is that is what this is about.
Right.
I mean, this entire discussion over the last year has been about solar merchant electric generating.
Yeah.
If
or-
anybody ever comes in here with wind, it's going to be a separate, you can add
Right.
the word wind in front of it, or coal.
Now,
I mean, we might want to just make different specific use standards. My understanding, based on the way it's merchant electric generating facility is defined, it's about the output of, so it's tied to that. So if you have 10 megawatts of generating from wind, that's why it would apply. So we could look at a different set of specific use standards. We could maybe increase setbacks, or we have language within our telecommunication towers that basically says the setback is tied to the tower height. So if you've got a 200-foot tower, you at least need to be 250 feet away from the property line, something like that, certain distance away from any structures. So we could kind of implement that language, just separate it out into two specific use standards. If you just want me to make this about solar, we would need some type of permitting process for wind.
Yes.
Well, it's the only issue though on wind versus solar is a height issue in
Um,
terms of what you're written here.
I mean, do we feel strongly that wind generating facilities need to be zoned industrial?
We haven't had a request
Yes.
from
I
the
mean-
county.
Well,
to-
so the.
Yeah, I know,
The only
but that
wind-
doesn't mean it won't happen.
like,
Yeah, but as
Yeah.
the discussion we had in the advisory committee, the only reason we're doing rezoning is so that the legislative bodies get a say, right? We're requiring properties to be rezoned from ag to industrial, so that instead of going to, as a conditional use permit and going to the Board of Adjustments, it goes to approval from the legislative body.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly how zone change works. It would take it out of the BOA's hands, but,
I'm just saying if the main issue is height, if you look at wind versus solar, in all your language, the main issue we need to talk about here is height. You can take care of that in E, that same page.
Yeah.
46, just by saying the minimum setback is, the minimum is 500 feet or 1.5 times the height of the height.
of the
Yeah,
tower,
Right.
yeah,
That's great, Terry.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that works for me. I think it,
Yeah, if you do
Makes it a
that
little
in there,
bit
that's
cleaner.
fine.
I don't know whatever they do for cell towers. I don't know if it's the height of the cell tower, if it's 1.5 times the height of the cell tower.
yeah, I can't remember the specific language. I just know it's tied to the height. So I'll just basically pull that language,
Yeah.
add it in. I don't know if we'll need to bring it back or not, but, or I can look at it now if we want to wordsmith it now. What do you think?
I think you, please go reference your documents and come back.
Okay,
And I
okay.
think we'd be better off. The point is that the way it was written, it was blended.
Yeah,
We needed to.
I think
we
we only
need to
get through
address
all
it.
of your edits before we
Yep,
go there.
That
may-
sounds good.
That may impact your table, which is on 5-5 page.
it,
I don't know that it will,
It,
but you
it
might.
shouldn't. It would still be wind or solar. We'd just be adding a additional specific use standard
Okay.
for wind.
On that table of 5.5, permitted is the item above, the big yellow one at the bottom. Commercial cemeteries and crematoriums,
Uh-huh.
permitted under LI and they're in the categories. Two of those categories, light or heavy industry. Are we permitting them to go under solar?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Are we allowing, by permitting them, are we, commercial crematoriums, are we allowing them to be under the merchant electric, or am I misreading this?
These are all just, this is the same use table that's already approved. The only
Okay.
changes I'm proposing is in the highlighted and red. So basically, commercial cemeteries and crematories, all of the jurisdictions have already approved that they can be, permitted uses in light and heavy industrial, conditional use in ag. If we go through a zone change to industrial, for a solar farm, we would be allowing any of those industrial uses. We can ask the applicant to agree to a certain set of conditions, kind of like we did with the DCA property, if you all recall. We were discussing certain conditions on that, but, yeah, these are all already approved. The only changes that we would be recommending for approval here are the highlighted.
Okay, the category of merchant electric generating facility then becomes a unique category under that those light.
Yeah, and it already was a unique
And that-
category.
That's fine, I just was clarifying my notes when I was
Okay,
thinking about it.
yeah.
So I understand what you, and I agree, it is the way it should be.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, the way we have it written now, because our previous recommendation of making it industrial hasn't been approved, it's just a moratorium in place, is that it's permitted in ag and then all three of the industrial zoning districts. So what this change would be doing is that in unincorporated Boyle County, it would not be permitted in ag. So it'd have to go to an industrial zoning district. Yeah. Okay.
So next question, Michaela, as you look into the next section, we have a top of 546 now.
Okay,
You've got, we're proposing a limit, maximum total allowable coverage of 2,000 acres
yep.
in the county.
Yep. Yeah, that's something that Mercer County put in their newest solar ordinance, and there was interest in seeing it in, so I added it in. I think it's apropos to discuss it, whether we feel the
Right.
2,000 acres is appropriate, whether we want to do it
So
as a
I looked up-
percentage, don't want to put a cap on.
I looked up, Boyle has 115,000 acres.
Yeah, I've got it as 117. I
Yeah.
looked up all that data for you.
Okay. I mean, it's less than 2%, we're talking about limiting
Yeah.
this to less than 2% of the
I've got
area.
1.7%.
Yeah,
Out of the 120 counties in Kentucky, we're like 111th in size.
it,
We're really
it just
small.
seems like a very restrictive limit, total. I don't know,
You think it should be bigger or smaller
big,
than 2,000?
I'm comfortable with it where it is, and if we get an overwhelming requirement in the future for more, we can always consider.
well, so what
2,000 doesn't
we're
sound like
doing.
a lot, but it's a pretty good sized
A
space.
typical solar farm might be 500 acres, maybe up to 2,000 acres. It's a little research I did.
I've seen them, I went back and looked through the internet, I've seen them 1,600, 1,500 acres,
Okay.
as high as that.
So this could be one, is what we're basically saying.
That's, yes, that's what I was leading to say.
And if somebody came with a proposal for two, or an additional one, we would need to go back and amend the ordinance again.
We're off-
All big as
Is that what we want to do?
That's a fair statement, because that's exactly right.
Right.
And then you're going to have that whenever you put a limit of acreage or a size element in there.
Just saying. We're putting a limit,
Well, no matter what number you put, you're putting a limit.
so do we need a limit?
I would say, yeah,
Yes.
Okay.
especially if you look at one of the major objectives is to retain
Yeah.
the county's character.
And my question wasn't whether there should be a limit, I agree there should be, is what should that number be? Which is exactly. It's not providing the county or any city in the county any direct benefit except for tax base.
Right.
None of this is, we're not legislating this here.
That's
Up
right.
to the legislating bodies, but I know that if I was on the fiscal court, which I'm never gonna be, you know, I would try to write an ordinance that says anything, any production that's gonna be in the county for, you know, renewable energy has to go to the county before it's sold to cities outside the county, you know, because then they're just using us as a, but, anyway, that's never gonna happen, because I'm not gonna be on the fiscal
No.
court.
Now,
But that's, what do we mean by retaining the character of the county? Why are we even asking this to be zoned industrial instead of ag? We've had these discussions before. I think a limit is appropriate. And I think a low limit is more appropriate than a high limit to, you know, initially.
I don't disagree. To start with.
one of the major reasons we delayed, tabled, or said that we need to put the moratorium on is we didn't have a commissioning plan And if you hadn't read it, that's one of the last paragraphs on 5-47. It refers to a state-defined
I mean, there's several-
decommissioning plan.
There's several pieces of this that are, I think, are excellent additions
Mhm.
and are consistent with the community meetings that we had, a year ago, you know,
Mhm.
that were out in recommendations from that group at that time. The decommissioning plan is one of them. That's a great thing, and the state has since put out regulations, and that's here.
And that section, I think, I really like the way it reads and the way it sets up, if you want to read it sometime and understand how the bond and the
Right.
pay, the decision on, and the evaluation is done to determine how that property can be returned back to its original state, is the way they refer to it. The balance of what we have in here are the other topics. And the rest of that particular KRS specification 278.706, which is not under the letter M parentheses, talks of many of the things that we have here. We have it, we have some very specific needs that we put in the way we have it rented. And the 2,000 acres is one of those things. It's not defined by the state.
I think that 2,000 acres is a concept that very few of us in here, because I think that you all have really good intellectual capacity. I don't know that any of us, I don't know the degree to which any of us in this room can imagine what 2,000 acres is right now, like as an abstract. Okay? Does that make sense? I've been to I've been to Garrett County many times to show people that solar array. I won't call it a farm. It's 400 acres. Okay? Standing there and looking at it from the actual place where the trailers were when they were doing the construction, I had a very difficult time imagining something that was 5 times bigger in my own head. Does that make sense? So what I'm saying is that I think it's I would be extremely cautious. I'll say no to going above 2,000 acres today for that reason. Okay, because once we put it in, it would be very easy for a merchant electric generator to come in and say, great, I'll do 10,000 acres because that's 10% of that's only 10%. And again, only 10% is an abstract concept to us because that's how humans do our thinking. That makes sense? 10% is a huge number. 2% is a bigger number than most of us understand. Okay, of even a small county. When you look at available land, like arable land that you could put this on, okay, it's not even, because not all of our county is accessible to solar, right, because of the knobs. Right? Once you take that out, now you're saying it's not 2,000 acres of 117,000. It's 2,000 acres of the portion of our county that's actually arable, okay, that's flat or rolling.
Located
That
near
is just-
transmission lines, located near substations.
Right, so now you're talking about aggregating this, and you really will lose, I think, the character of the county. Once you, I think 2,000 acres is gonna lose the character of the county. I think more than 2,000 acres will destroy the character of the county. So I'm just gonna say, I won't vote to go over, I like this number. I don't know how that number was came about, but I won't go over that number.
Well, and one of your comments is correctly, those investors have talked about, you have to be at a way to join into the subsystem electric
Right.
activity.
You have to be
And
located near the,
There's one on the east side in Garrett County, just on the other side down at that direction. There's not as easy to get to it at another place. Those are only 2 areas that seems to be economic investment likely for the investors.
Or they'll build another one.
It very well could, which has its own avenue of activity. You're right.
okay, so
I'm not an advocate of making that number larger. My question was,
okay.
should it be smaller as a limit? it does play into, you could have a total of allowable coverage, the way that's referred to, that's a total allowable coverage at all locations, all sites, is what that's intended to be. And I might ask the question for clarification here, is it, is that the property, we have a clearance between 500 feet public clearance or right-of-ways or clearance around the perimeter of the actual panel placements themselves. I assume those acreage it would include that acreage also.
So that one is a
Yeah.
separate question I would ask.
Well, but I'm just making sure, and I think that's the general
And it's-
intent, right?
We probably could clean that up. It could be 2,000 acres of the property rather than, or what's dedicated as part of the site plan, what's the boundary survey for the site plan, or, I don't know. I don't know how to clean that up, but
Because
that's a good
The
point.
Garrett property includes 32 engineered retainment ponds, because that water can't, the rainwater can't soak into the ground now, so that the 32 retainment ponds for that 400 acres, and they're not all, they're not inside the solar array themselves.
Correct.
Um,
But I thought we were pushing into industrial to address that type of water runoff and issues. That's what we were doing.
And size.
And size, exactly how to handle and address that.
So-
So I thought that was being addressed.
So, to me, your point, Sam, on the setback requirement.
Yes.
We're moving from 100 feet to 500, at least that's the proposed.
That's the
And-
proposed, yeah.
And the state standard that we did not accept, that's written in the KRS, is 2,000 feet.
Really?
I just read it.
Okay.
Plus,
The-
I don't think I misunderstood that.
The community discussion on the model ordinance was more like 100 feet, which is where we were before.
And-
I'm concerned, I think, about in that one, if we make it larger, we have kind of the unintended consequence that now somebody's going to make more property industrial. They're going to come to us to change the zoning for a larger area in order to get a certain area of solar.
Well, you likely, since we're talking about the other people that live around the perimeter of this property, you'll probably reach a limit on how much you can do. You're right. But you're right. Dan, these are all valid directional characteristics. I was wondering, I'm not sure how to resolve them yet, but I see definitions of terminology here. I want to make sure we have it clear.
I'm trying to intellectually make that leap to how you zone only the array, the panels, light industrial, and not the setback. How do you not make that?
It's all, the whole thing is.
I think it has to be the whole thing.
Right,
So,
that's what so my,
so inside the outer perimeter of it, right now, we're saying it's another 500 feet before you see a panel.
right. So my point is, somebody coming to us with a project is going to therefore purchase more land.
Well, then, yes.
Or it's written, yeah.
And now, by putting a 2,000 acre limit on there, that's the total land, which includes
Right.
that
We're-
area.
We're going to have more land zoned industrial because of that,
2,000 acres.
because of that perimeter
Up to 2,000
requirement.
acres.
And, yes, there
You're
is a,
not gonna have more than 2,000.
exactly.
Right.
And it's not going to necessarily be one farm either. It can be scattered around the county.
Exactly.
Could be.
And to your point, Dan, that I think's a good one, if we make it 2,000 today, and we see the county being gobbled up, tomorrow we can change it to 5,000 or whatever we want. This isn't poured in concrete forever.
I mean,
No.
I honestly think it's unlikely that happens, but, you know.
Well, we also have another thing we haven't discussed yet. When you become light industrial, you have to have sewer there. So it's unlikely that any of this will come about anyway.
Well, that was one of my, you were heading down to some of those type of unique things that are in industry. And the ideal is, what are we going to make this unique enough that it's, doesn't need it? That's the question. Sewer, yeah.
can we compromise to the 2,000 and move on there and see our other restrictions that may make this more or less?
I'm agreeing with both Tom and I don't need it nothing any bigger than that.
Yeah, I'm okay if we stay, if we're staying with the 2,000 acres, I'll agree with that, with everybody's discussion. I think we're being a little too restrictive with the 500 feet margin. That seems
A
to
little
me.
too restrictive?
Well,
There's many properties I've seen where the houses are within that, they have a backyard of 25 feet to the fence. And you were going to put that from that point to where they see the panels. An acre is 206 by 206 square feet.
yeah.
So if you use that in perspective on here, and many people don't have, in the unincorporated area, they have an acre maybe. They might have 5 acres. Or they'll have a great big number of acres. It's kind of how it seems to work. We're not in city limits where you have 15 foot. You know, your backyard touches the other guy's backyard, the other folks' backyard. But, so now the question is how much clearance do you want to be able to sit in the backyard and see the panels or not see the panels? Or how much you see them?
We're dealing with the folks who think solar panels are ugly and don't want to see them. And if they don't want to see them, I don't know that there's a big difference between 100 feet and 500 feet.
Actually, I think there is a substantial
You think
difference in
so?
that, yeah.
I-
Because that would mean I'd have 2.5 acres stacked back across the back. It's hard for me to see the detail. I can put a hedge, trees up, and they're gone.
Yeah. But, you know, we have landscaping requirements in here as well,
Yep.
just saying.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of people in the county that don't want us to make it so restrictive that you can't have solar farms too. The county's kind of divided or polarized between wanting it so restrictive you can't have them and people seeing it as a economic enterprise that benefits the county.
And I'm not trying to restrict it from occurring. I'm saying if I'm just happen to have a piece of property that's adjoining that property that's going to be rechanged, and I didn't have any history when I bought this that was going to happen, and suddenly it's there.
So my point to that, Mr. Chair, is that, you know, they have an avenue to address that through their county representatives. But the county representatives have asked us to come up with an ordinance for that. So I think we're doing that, you know, I think we're doing that to their, and actually really well.
Isn't that the site plan review when we get down to how close things are to the edge?
Well, we have to
Yeah,
put the setback requirements in, and then when somebody brings in a site plan, they'll have to meet it. Yeah.
that's correct.
So,
So I'm not an advocate of making it 100 feet. And, you know, I'm not so sure 2,000 feet's required, which is what some of the specs say. And we
Well,
had,
the advisory committee changed it from 100 to 500. So
Mhm.
can we go with that and move on?
and
I
down,
think we accept the advisory committee, that's what they're for.
and then that doesn't change anything, which is a couple of paragraphs later where you're talking about closer to a church, synagogue, or they're 750 feet. We had that a couple paragraphs later.
I'd like you to move on to what else you're suggesting.
okay. I just had one question that I posed to Henry that I just kind of wanted to throw out there as far as the 2,000 acre cap. I'm just not sure if that would include any public utility that comes in. They're exempt. If we want to count that towards the cap or not, if it would count towards the cap or not, this might be something Henry and I need to think about a little bit. I just want to let you know that that's something we do have to consider as part of this.
So a public utility is not,
Yeah, that's a good question too. And do we want this to count towards wind and or solar, or just solar?
I think the height of a wind it'll happen anyway for clearances.
I mean for the 2,000 acre cap.
Oh, okay.
Henry.
I personally think the wind is, if solar's obnoxious, wind is just as obnoxious, so we ought to include them together.
Okay,
I think that's my opinion, you keep them in the common basket.
Merchant electric generating, however they generate.
yep. Okay, that works for me. So moving on, not much has changed, so I'm not gonna cover all that unless you all have any questions from what we previously approved. I made a,
Michaela, the only question that we talked about at the advisory committee was
Uh-huh.
just on I, L, excuse me, where we approved previously, facility construction has to be on a public street with minimum pavement width of 18 feet. So we're saying this has to be located near major roads.
The state minimum road is 24 feet. We've got a bunch of roads in the county that are below that today that are grandfathered. Obviously, they were built before the state minimums were made 24 feet. Any road that's built today has to be built to that 24 feet, but that doesn't mean that they have to expand the current
Right.
16-foot roads.
So just thinking about unintended consequences, that means that it's less likely that this is going to be somewhere out in the county where it's less visible. It's going to be somewhere along more of a major road where it's more visible. That's what we're saying.
yep,
How wide are the county roads, some of these smaller ones that we're talking about?
I
Is
mean,
18 feet, are they smaller than 18
so,
feet?
there are some that are probably 10, 11, 12 feet, honestly. Not all of them. There's plenty that are 18 feet wide, but there are certainly some that I can think of off the top of my head that are maybe 12 feet wide.
Hogue Hollow's 18 feet wide. They're not gonna put one up there, but White Oak is plenty wide.
I'm just trying to get a feel for how restricted is the 18 feet. You know, are
Yeah,
most of the
just-
roads 18 feet?
Quirk's Run is 18 feet.
Yeah, but I'm not a county boy, I don't know where all these roads are.
I mean, I'm just saying, they're off of the Perryville Road. I mean,
Yeah,
you don't get to the smaller roads until you're off of.
yeah.
If you have 18 feet, you have two semis, the mirrors touch and they're sitting off the edge on both sides. That's what you get for a big semi. The dump trucks have a fun time going past each other. You just drive over and the right wheel goes over in the ditch. You pass each other and you get back on the road. There really is no ditches on 18-foot or smaller
Okay.
wide roads.
Just checking.
Okay.
I live on one of those.
J, I made a slight change for any loading and unloading areas. They should be oriented away from public streets and in the rear of any structure. That just, adds a little bit additional screening for any loading or unloading areas. And then the final change was decommissioning plan. We just had to emulate the state's requirements, so, if the state's updates at any point, ours would follow, so it's always in line with theirs. But that would basically require the developer to come in, get a bond, update it every 7 years, return it back to its previous use.
In that decommissioning, the state version of it, it allows Boyle County to be a second person on where the money would go to if it needs to go to somebody. It allows that to happen. So I thought that was interesting. It doesn't stay in the state pot, in a sense,
Yep.
even though they administrate it all.
So, yeah, finally, the sewer question came up. There was talk at advisory committee of potentially making a carve-out for this particular use to exempt it from sewer requirements. Henry and I thought about it a bit. He proposed language that we could maybe bring into Article 5. We both think it would be a little bit cleaner if we did an Article 4 where the actual dimensional standards with the sewer requirement is is currently in our ordinance. To do that, we would need to re-advertise. I only advertise for Article 5, not Article 4. So I can show you what language Henry proposed. It's up on the screen here. So basically in the beginning, he would add in, however, merchant electric generating facilities where no on-site facility is outfitted with indoor plumbing shall be exempt from any development standards requiring connection to the public sewer. Such facilities shall follow all other development standards. So we could do something like that. We could try and put something in Article 4 instead. That would require me to re-advertise, bring it back next month. It seems like there's some questions about setbacks and heights and things like that, so we might be bringing it back anyway. But I just wanted to make sure this is something the planning commission's interested in seeing as some type of carve out for the sewer.
This is reasonable.
Ridiculous to require sewer.
I agree, because then it's arbitrarily,
Yeah.
that would be a way for us to say, well, we're never gonna allow
Yeah.
solar in the
So I
county.
don't, I like what you're putting up there.
I
If they
think
don't have a
that's right.
bathroom on there, then they don't need sewer.
Right.
Okay.
Henry, isn't it true that with light industrial, you can go to the, conditional use permit without sewer?
I'm unaware that the development standards for all the industrial zones show not applicable for any acreage that doesn't connect to public sewer. They, for anything that's listed as septic under light industrial, it shows it as being not applicable, which is to say it prohibits it.
Conditional use permit?
I'll take a look. I'll hunt that down. The thing I looked at was those development standards. I'll look at that right now.
Yeah.
This recommendation, Henry.
Yeah, so we'll think about it a little bit more. We might end up bringing something through in Article 4 once I make those changes that we talked about today and potentially re-advertise if we feel that this language is better. But in some way, shape, or form, we'll bring up a few options for you all for the carve out for sewer and whatever language you all feel is, going to be best suited for that. We can do that at the next month's meeting. But I just want to make sure there was interest in that before we went ahead and re-advertised and then didn't do it.
It makes sense.
I don't think we should unless you just want to go forward with this. Henry had a little bit of concern with this language, is that right?
You're talking about this language that's up right now? Yes, I like the idea of it being in Article 4. I think we also are wanting to chase down height-related setback requirements for wind. And I have a little question about these ordinances bumping up against more stringent state statutory requirements, where if we allowed something that was more permissive than the state, it would have no legal effect. They'd still have to follow the state. So I think we ought to even that out as well.
Yep. Yeah, so I would say we don't vote on it. We can table it if you all want, and then I can re-advertise if we end up bringing the Article 4 change in for the sewer, so.
Well, you think you're going to want to do that in Article 4, and therefore you're going to need to re-advertise?
I think it's gonna be cleaner. Henry's concern with this was that we don't know what authority Planning Commission has to basically grant that variance from the dimensional standards, even with a carve out here. So putting in Article 4, whether we put an asterisk and make an exemption, or we just put a minimum lot size for sewer in the county, for industrial, we'll take a look at it and think through what we think is best, and then we can bring it to you all, but I think it's gonna be in Article 4.
I think for the reviewing public, having the exemption from the requirement, both of those things in the same place makes the ordinance easier to navigate.
Yeah.
Okay, so our conclusion is we're gonna re-advertise for section 4 and 5.
Yeah, I'll probably just list both. I think we'd only be required to advertise for Article 4 if you all table this to the next meeting. But
All right, do we have a motion to table then?
I mean, I think you're suggesting there's more work to do.
yeah,
So it's reasonable for us to table this at the moment.
yeah, beyond just Article 4, we need to, I missed some of that setback language with
I'd-
with the state statute,
I'd
so we
I'd
need to
like
make sure it's
yeah, take
unmatched.
another look at it, make it a little clearer, it's easier to follow.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's great work that was already done, by the way. It's great work.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, we had an advisory committee meeting, and we dealt with section 5 that was brought here today, and that's about all, wasn't it?
Right.
Okay. So,
Yep.
and you've had a budget committee, no, you had a financial report. Do we have a budget committee report yet?
Other than you're gonna present in May. right?
Yep, we will be presenting to the city commission, Danville City Commission on Thursday, May 2nd at 9:30 for our application for funding requests. So that'll include our 75,000 that we're requesting for planning commission plus the additional 25,000 for the DHB. So,
And you said the county isn't requiring a presentation.
nope, they didn't require an application for us this year, so they've tentatively approved. I don't think it's officially approved, so, but,
Do we have a personnel committee report?
nope.
Other new business?
Yeah, Lyndon Smith with the Bluegrass Area Development District is here, so I'll just let him.
I just thought we'd come by today and collect any comments, suggestions on the goals and objectives, and work forward on that. If anybody's got any areas of concern that you've seen so far.
So this includes considering the input that all of us provided, not saying everything was incorporated, but you factored in the input that everybody provided.
Right.
Okay.
Lyndon, this looks different from what you've given us the, 2 or 3 meetings ago? You gave us one, and I apologize, I've been marking up the old one.
Oh, that's fine.
That's-
That's fine. Yeah, any kind of comments, anything that you think is omitted that we need to touch upon? We're not at a stage yet where we're looking for adopting the goals and objectives. We're still just taking commentary on it and working it into shape.
Can I have one more for you to consider?
Sure.
As an objective, is to make an amendment to the zoning ordinance to go back to a maximum of, to a minimum of 5-acre subdivision in the ag zone outside the urban service boundary, the way that it used to be.
Okay,
Because right now, it's 1 acre. And what that's done is in several parts of the county has made, urban level density
Yeah.
outside that area, which is forced services out there that weren't intended
correct.
out in the flume. So that would be, a recommended objective, is to go back to 5 acres. So, again, specifically, in the ag zone outside the urban service boundary.
The part of that I don't like, Tom, I mean, I understand your argument completely. The other side of that, to me, is a farm family that has their farm, their children grow up, and they want to cut off a small section for their children to live next door to them. And if you do that, then they have to cut off 5 acres.
That's correct.
And,
That's absolutely correct. But we're seeing the unintended consequences of that now in the county.
yeah, where you get 1 acre, 1 acre, 1 acre, don't you?
Yeah.
You have entire roads now in the county that have urban level density traffic on those 16-foot wide roads. And you have urban level density of homes where there's not you know, fire and police out there. And so I do understand that, but I do think that if the family does have a big farm, that's part of owning that property, and to say if you want to cut it off, you got to cut off 5 acres.
There are subregs where communities do a family conveyance exemption, basically. So you would get one 1.15 acre lot that you could deed to a family member. Everything else would have to meet the 5 acres. I've seen language like that. I can't recall it exactly off the top of my head, but you know, that is something that could be considered if that's the biggest concern, if you want that family conveyance cut out, but then overall you want to protect and force those larger lots so we don't have that urban style development, that is an option. So.
And
I was-
all this does, by the way, is it doesn't mean that it can never happen. It means that we have a process to move that urban service boundary outward, okay? And then that changes everything. You know, once that urban service boundary is moved out there, or the zone is changed from ag to, you know, single family, then you can do that. I just think that it puts it within process.
What about a border around a 1 acre thing, that you can't have 2 1 acre things within so many feet of each other? So you don't get the density that you're talking about, which I agree is undesirable, but yet you don't have to cut off 5 acres.
I think that the ag zone is the important thing here. I think that it's zoned ag, okay? So I think that ag zone means something. And so if we're talking about having multiple single-family homes, then that ought to be zoned that way. That's what I'm thinking. The zone definitions ought to mean what they mean.
So just as another point, we do have the rural residential zoning district. It's not very common here. I don't know that we have much area that's zoned rural residential. That's a 40,000 square foot minimum lot size. So basically, if somebody wanted to come in and do a subdivision of those essentially 1 acre lots, they would have that avenue, but it would require a zone change going to rural residential. So then that would give the planning commission and fiscal court some power to review, see if infrastructure is appropriate, et cetera, versus it just being permitted by right. Just something to think about, but.
I like the whole point of what the definitions are. Why do we have zoning? Why do we have ag defined as ag? Why do we have rural, that rural whatever?
Rural residential.
Rural residential, why do we have single-family residential zones? Why do we even have those? And it's not in keeping with the flume. You know, what we have allowed today is not in keeping with what we say that we want in the county, and I think that's incumbent upon us. That's what
And
I
it's
wanna-
not just today, it's all the way back into the 80s.
That's what I'm getting at.
70s.
And
I've
I'm
got a
saying, I
ton
think
of
that
years
we
that this has
ought to
been.
be honest, and we ought to be, we ought to go by what the, otherwise what we're doing is just saying, we'll just allow anything to happen however we feel like it on that day. So that's why I wanna recommend that.
I'm just concerned that what you're talking about is a very specific thing that we should be acting on independently of the comprehensive plan. I mean, you're making a specific proposal to change an ordinance in a
As
certain
part of the
way.
comprehensive plan.
Well, you're
But-
making a recommendation.
But I think the comprehensive plan
That we
needs to
get back
be
in
more,
line.
Well, your
general.
recommendation is that we review it. I mean, right, are you saying the recommendation is to change it or to review it?
That we make the recommendation to the fiscal court to change that ordinance.
There's already language in the comp plan that suggests we review it, that there's probably a paragraph or two that kind of indicates that it may be too small and it's allowing for urban style development. It's not within the goals and objectives, but it is in the land use element. Maybe a paragraph, but,
It allows us to study it and evaluate it, although we've
Right,
not done it.
yeah.
I mean, I think the objective of the comprehensive plan is to be more broad rather than specific, and we should then interpret what the comprehensive plan is gonna tell us to do.
And Dan, that's where I was thinking in my mind. Comprehensive is like a guidebook on here. This particular one, not that I agree or disagree with it, and I got to think about it, is a very specific step.
Right.
We have some specific steps in that.
And we need to not ignore those. We need to take those up and look at those. But I'm not sure, and it may end up being in the comprehensive plan, but it needs a bigger picture of evaluation, because I got 50 years, 45 years of this going on already. What are we going to do with the ones we have?
And that's what this is what Lyndon can do for us.
You want to have a policy that's basically a reasonable amount of scrutiny, red tape, hoops to jump through for the public based on what it is they're asking. And this is in every county in Kentucky where you have a farm situation, you have kids, they want their own place, things like that. There's a lot of alternatives. However, if you are going to have an in-family conveyance like that, do you think it's too big an ask for that family to go through a zone change, A1 to RR for 1 acre, in order to convey that off as a building lot? Because after that's done, that RR is something that can be sold off, can be conveyed, and they can come through and do it again. And I have seen, a bit of abuse in agricultural land divisions where you have a farm road that effectively is turned into a residential street. I don't know if that's an acute problem for you all, that you've seen situations where you want to pump the brakes on that. But it really comes down to reasonableness. Is it reasonable to ask the farmer to go through the zone change process in order to give the son or daughter an acre of land?
We do have multiple examples of that in the county, that creek over the last 20 years that has resulted today in exactly what you're talking about. So, urban level traffic.
Yeah, and a lot of folks who come to areas like this, they're specifically looking for a house out in the country. And your real estate market has them. They're out there available to be purchased. And you just need to sort of exercise a light hand on regulating things like that on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you've already got situations, you might want to say, well, the farmer can buy their son or daughter a 1 acre lot. There's plenty available out there. And one of the things I do is I actually go through real estate listings online just to see what the real estate market is like. And you've got a very healthy, real estate market out there. But, there is always that, farmer who wants to give an acre to a family member in order to build a house. So where do you want to come down on that?
Tom and I are both saying that's a good question. There's multiple sides to it. And if you had the 5 acre requirement, and then you're a farmer and you still don't want to give away 5 acres, because then your son or daughter has a problem of mowing it and maintenance of 5 acres.
Right.
You could still come in for a zone change, right, Michaela, and ask to zone 1 acre plot next to your house to residential, right?
Yep, if, say we end up changing the minimum lot size in the ag zoning district to 5 acres, then we would essentially be requiring somebody to apply for a zone change to rural residential to cut off that 1 acre lot for their son or daughter or whatever. What's that?
That cutting off 5 acres doesn't prevent the farmer from continuing to farm that 5 acres outside the house. I mean, it doesn't put a fence around that 5 acres, you know?
Yeah, but then if his child gets a divorce and
Yeah.
sells the property, it's
Yeah,
back to your neighbor
that's
has
exactly
5
the point.
acres.
But that's exactly the point of why ag is ag and not residential. All I'm saying is that the county thinks it's important enough to have a boundary that it calls an urban service boundary. The county thinks it's important enough to have ag zone and residential zone. I think we ought to honor that. For the same reason that we're requiring merchant electric generating to be industrial and not ag.
So are you suggesting a change to one of the objectives under general land development? Is that
I'm,
what
su-
you're
I'm suggesting that, what I'm telling you is that when I've talked to the magistrates, they've said that they're ready to make that, to change to the ordinance. They need P and Z to make the recommendation to them to make that change. And I'm thinking that this is a good place to do that, is in the comp plan.
Yeah, I just think you're piggybacking a separate issue. We should take that change somewhere, but it's a specific item, not necessarily part of the comp plan.
I'm just trying to figure out if it goes in a particular location within this, or if you're asking to have.
Could we make it
to
an
have
objective to?
addressed in here.
Probably in land,
some way.
probably in the last one, land use, Sally?
In the last objective under land use,
I would think if it goes in here, that would be,
under like number,
I don't know, Lyndon, you could tell us where that would go if we wanted some general statement about separation of ag.
Yeah, ag being ag and.
And in that case, I'm okay as long as we frame it as ag is ag and when.
Yeah, we can definitely add something. And it's going to be specific as in-family conveyance? Or just
No,
any
just that-
conveyance?
I think it would just be review minimum lot size requirements within the unincorporated Boyle County, or I think it could go under Goal 1 of land use. That's talking about protecting the quality of life and character of Boyle County.
I agree with putting it under the review context.
Yeah,
I don't think the goal should say that we're gonna specifically change it. I think the goal should be that we're gonna, under the goals and objectives, that we're gonna review this again.
And I think it is still a step up from what we currently have. Michaela's referring to something in the future land use section that talks about reviewing this policy. And there is a pretty specific guidance in there talking about options to move away from the 1 acre. But I think there's a difference between putting it in the future land use section at the end, which is reviewed by this commission, as opposed to putting it in goals of objectives, which gets shipped off to the legislative bodies. I think that holds more power.
That's what I'd like to do, is ship that off to them, so that now they have the backing to go make that change in the ordinance.
may I ask you another question in regards to this revision?
Yes.
Do you see substantive changes that you have made to this that you would like us to comment upon?
Not yet, no. Actually, I'm waiting for you all to frame what issues you want to address. Basically, we're looking for things, what happened over the past 5 years that you were unprepared for. Because you can never imagine everything that folks are going to come up with And as Michaela knows, sometimes the phone rings and you'll hear a story that you never would have imagined before. So there's a lot of circumstances out there that you need to just understand that your general principles as they come out here have to be interpreted into some issues. So, you know, what kind of things have happened and what kind of things do you see coming in the future that you need to have policy to address? Yeah, I mean, the in-family conveyance, that's something that every county practically has addressed in one way or another. Some of them decide just don't do anything specific in regard to that, and that, you know, the in-family conveyance can work within the rural residential zone change. It's a little tricky in order to have a carve-out for in-family conveyances as opposed to any other kind of commercial conveyance.
So we're gonna talk about this again, right? You're
Oh,
gonna come back
absolutely, yeah.
again, so can we, just say we'll talk about it in the future again?
Yeah, and I know Michaela's got some suggestions. I have not incorporated those into this yet. And this is the kind of thing where we could email things back and forth just to cut down on the number of sessions that we take up at your regular meetings. It doesn't, you know, we don't have to move quickly in order to get to the end of the comprehensive plan. You know, looking forward, hopefully 6 months from now, we'll be done. But, and we can take our time with it. And I have suggested to Michaela that, you know, we have public hearings at each of your regular meetings, but outside of those, we can still, you know, have a back and forth in order to get suggestions and things, issues to consider, a draft verbiage, things like that. But no, we're really still in the collection of opinions stage of this. And, you know, this is very valuable input.
So, Tom, you wanna be in the comprehensive plans, that why you're proposing this right now, or you want it to be
Sounds like
more direct and timely?
email him
and
some
go
draft
as a
No,
change
we're all
to-
good. The discussion's been had right now, and I think that I think that we're good right now. I think that the
Okay.
discussion that we've had, and Lyndon knows exactly where we're going, and I like Michaela's and Henry's recommendations. I'm very satisfied right now.
Okay. All right.
So I would like to comment upon the section that has to do with transportation.
Okay.
You were mentioning areas that may have come up within the last period of time. For me, I've always have my eye out in regards to subdivisions or changes that are being made in terms of whether it's going to adversely affect the safety of the roadways that are around and the access points. I like what you put into, under transportation, under providing a safe transportation by requiring developers to provide standard streets and limiting the number of direct access points. I think as the county and city grows and changes, we need to be very aware of the safety of our transportation system.
And I think, Lyndon, if you're not up on the city initiative for Safe Danville, that
Yes.
they've put a big emphasis on that just
Yeah.
recently, so that might be, you know, a little bit more language or a little bit higher priority in terms of safety.
I think he did just get with Josh to ask for that plan, the Vision Zero, or whatever it's called.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a tricky one too, because there's some issues that I think of as first to the trough. Let's say you've got a guy comes in, he wants to put 50 lots on 20 acres, and he's going to create a single entrance point so that all those 50 lots empty onto a state road. He's going to have to pay not just to build his own road, but to widen that state route and to put in a turning lane, or maybe a 3-lane with a center turning lane. And that burden for that improvement to the state roads falls on him, but then suddenly his neighbors, they're ready to develop as well, and they're using his access point, trying to get an equitable distribution of responsibility for infrastructure improvements. That's kind of a tricky thing. You've got areas in the USB that are quite large and ready to develop, and it's almost a burden to the first person to jump in when they have to start making those off-site improvements. And I'll absolutely address that in here as best as I can.
Any other discussion of the goals and objectives submitted? And do we have any other new business?
I do not.
Do we have any announcements?
Nope.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Multiple seconds. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you all.